Arrow FM 97.2, 92.7. My name is Alex Nyman, and this is Jazz Club. A very warm welcome. As I said before, you are listening to Arrow FM 92.7, not 97.2. And my name is Alex Nyman, and this is Jazz Club. And we've kicked off there with a wonderful track that I found a little while ago, and that was a chap called Richard Galliano, and the name of the album is Les Années Milan. I think it means the years of Milan, and he was probably there. And it's I think it's all tracks to do with Edith Piaf and Astor Piazzolla. And yeah, really, really beautiful, kind of has that kind of like French kick to it, doesn't it? But amazing, superb playing. And I've got a whole wonderful selection of tracks lined up for you this afternoon. And let's have a look, see how we got. Now, actually, this has got a little bit of I've called this Jazz Club Latin Flavors Special. So there's a lot of Latin stuff going on, but not necessarily all Latin. It's just that, you know, there's quite a bit of Latin stuff in there, and by Latin I mean, you know, sort of I'm trying to think. Actually, I'm not even too sure what I mean. It's got a Latin flavour to it, and you'll hear that as we go through the show. I've got Jovino Santos and Neto Andre, and I've got John Blake and Grover Washington, Brian Blade, Edward Simon, Stan Getz, Charlie Bird, Salvatore Bonavedi, Eddie Higgins, David Sanchez, Hampton Halls, and a whole heap more. I'm not sure, as usual, if I'm going to actually get through them all, but I'm going to do my best. And it's all we say. If I stop yakking, you'll get to hear more. So next up is a track here by Jovino Santos Neto. That was a piano duo, actually. That was Jovino Santos Neto and Andrei Memari playing a track called Tambor de Osho. And I'm sure I pronounced that completely wrong. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's kind of like that. So, and that was off their album called Guris or Guris. Again, I'm not too sure. That was actually, the album is celebrating the music of a chap who I've never met personally, but I know an awful lot about him. He's a guy called Hermeto Pascoal, and he's a Brazilian chap, and he looks kind of a bit like, what shall I say, like Father Christmas, great big white beard down to his sort of, midriff and flowing long white locks, and I think he's about must be, I guess he's got been around about 70 years old now at least, but he is the most amazing musician. He is just incredible. I've seen he can basically make music pretty much out of anything, and I know that I recently saw a video of him on YouTube sitting down at a breakfast table with a couple of saucers, plate, knife, fork, and a few bits and pieces around, and having breakfast, and basically within about 5 minutes he was playing virtually everything and making this most amazing rhythmical track that you could have laid anything over and it would have sounded fantastic. And he's a great composer as well, and I will really I think actually I really should make a point of getting some more tracks from him. I think I played one or two before, but he really is just an incredible musician, and from as far as I'm aware, a very, very wonderful chap as well. And so anyway, let's move on a little bit. I've got, and now this is a guy who, again, unfortunately I never met personally, but I'm very familiar with his playing. It's a guy called Grover Washington, very famous saxophone player. Was kind of like into the smooth jazz thing, and made a huge name for himself playing that. Very soulful guy, and I think he's you probably heard him playing on a lot of kind of like pop tracks and things like that. Maybe you wouldn't have recognised him as that being Grover Washington. And there was one track, and I'm trying to think what it is right now. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I will remember while we're listening to this track. And this track is called Val's Blues. who said you can't play jazz on a violin? Well, nobody told John Blake, that's for sure, because that was him playing on that. And Stefan Grappelli, of course, played wonderful jazz on the violin, but in kind of more kind of like gypsy style. But that's kind of almost straight ahead style there by John Blake, and what a great player he is. Again, this is a journey of discovery for me, and I hope a journey of discovery for you if you're listening at home. And by the way, I should just say I did start the show a wee bit early today, so if you have just joined me, before that you haven't heard, but there were one or two tracks, but I'm sure if you'd like to catch the show later on tonight, it's repeated at 9 o'clock or tomorrow on Wairarapa TV, channel 41 at 12, 5 and 11 p.m. You can hear that, or of course you go to the Arrow FM webpage and check out the podcast, and you'll hear the music that I played before. Anyway, so that was a track called Val's Blues, and that was featuring that saxophone player called Grover Washington. And I was just trying to think while the music was playing, what was a track that everybody kind of knows, I would imagine, that you might have heard, that might not have known that Grover Washington was playing on that. And it was really, really difficult to try and think of a track, try to hear the music in my head. Well, there was another track playing in my headphones, so I took the headphones off, and that didn't help anyway, because I could still hear it a little bit. But then it came to me, the track is called Just the Two of Us. Da da dee 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 da da dee 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 dee. That's the saxophone line, or thereabouts anyway. So so that was the track that Grover played on. But I mean, he really played on lots and lots of other tracks as well. Very famous saxophone player, sadly passed a number of years ago, and it's all the tracks and stuff that he's done in the past are all out there on either all out there. You could listen to virtually everything on Apple at the moment, or virtually everything on YouTube. Be quite honest with you, I think most everything else has been put out there. Seems like if you just really want to listen to something nowadays, you've got to log on to YouTube, and you'll find it. Somebody's posted it there somewhere, in the hope of getting lots of hits, no doubt. But anyway, it's all out there. Coming up next soon, what have I got now? I've got Brian Blade and Stan Getz. Yeah, I'm going to play some Brian Blade, one of my very favourite drummers, Brian Blade. And this is a track off his album called Unicity, and this is called The Messenger. Inner City album there, and that was featuring Edward Simon on piano, John Patitucci on bass, and Brian Blade on the drums. Not heard of Edward Simon before, so there's another new name for me to check out. Fantastic player. I really enjoyed that. Excellent. Coming up next, anyway, I know what you're thinking at home now. You're thinking, Alex, why haven't you played some saxophone stuff? We always play saxophone stuff, and there's not really been enough of it, has there? Well, actually, be quite honest, I don't think there's been any so far. So I tell you, I'm going to rectify that right now, and I'm going to play one of the most wonderful saxophone players that ever graced the planet, by the name of Stan Getz. And I think John Coltrane once said of Stan Getz, and we'd all sound like him if we could. And unfortunately, as many people have tried, they do sort of, quite a number of tenor players out there that do a pretty good impression of Stan Getz, but nobody's ever really kind of nailed his sound. It's just the most individual. I mean, it really is a sound. One player amongst probably maybe about a dozen or so that I could identify with just one note. I don't even care what note it was. I'd be able to identify that particular tenor player. And one of the most readily identifiable sounds in the whole history of saxophone playing, and that is this Stan Getz, and he's playing with a guitarist called Charlie Bird. rather unusual ending, sort of a comedy ending. I'm sure it wasn't a comedy in the studio. As wonderful a player as Stan Getz was, he had his nickname amongst those, and I'm sure nobody ever said it to him, but his nickname was the Bear, because apparently he had a bit of a bad temper on him, and if he didn't like what you were playing, he would let you know in no uncertain terms. And I've probably mentioned this story, I think back when we were in the old studios up the road on Queen Street. However, it's probably worth mentioning again because these sort of personal stories about saxophone players or musicians in general are always very, very interesting, because what you hear and what you get from the individual can often be, a whole world apart. And Stan was, just the most incredible player. Extremely romantic player, when I say romantic, the way that he played was very so melodic. And in fact, I know he once said that he'd never played a note that he didn't mean to play, i.e. no wrong notes. Everything he did, and there were no wrong notes. If you can take any Stan Getz solo, pull it apart, and everything makes sense. There's no fancy stuff. There's no unnecessary stuff. He was just perfect at laying down solos and being himself, and just a wonderful player. However, there were times when he certainly gave it to other musicians between the eyes, and I know that he gave Stan Tracy, an English piano player, back at Ronnie Scott's in London. I think back in I'm not sure if it was the late 50s or the early 60s, but I know that he gave Stan a particularly hard time and told him that basically the trio were rubbish and they couldn't swing, and apparently Stan just turned around him and said, that's a load of something that rhymes with what's that word that's that thing that they have on a boat, rollicks. That's right, the rollicks, yes. Anyways, a word that rhymed with that, and he said, Stan, you're talking a load of that, and that's basically it actually shut him up, which was good, because then they got on with the playing, and they actually discovered that really they could swing and they were actually quite good. But yeah, I guess it's one of those guys that maybe you just had to sort of say, oh, calm down, this is the way it is, and this is what we're going to do. Anyway, marvellous player, absolutely wonderful player, and I know he went through a lot of personal hardship, both self-inflicted and not through his own doing. He was a heroin addict for quite some time, and I know he kicked that after a while. But he had a lot of ups and downs in his career, mostly ups actually. He really was well lauded by the American society. Everybody loved Stan. He was a big draw card for lots of jazz festivals, and his album sold in the millions, which is, I guess unusual to a certain extent for saxophone players and jazz musicians in general. And but as I say, one of those sort of guys that I certainly like to get my students at the School of Music in Wellington to take his solos, study them, be able to play them, and try and achieve that in the inflections that he does. Even if you can't get that sound, which you most probably can't, at least to kind of work your way into his kind of psyche and trying to get into his head. Anyway, let's move on. As I said, this is a Latin flavour special. So I've got a couple of tracks that are coming up. I'm going to play them back to back. And the first track is by a guy, again, I don't know this person, Salvatore Bonavedi. And Enrico Rava, actually, I do know, his trumpet player. Very, very good. And then coming after that, so that particular track is called oh no, Veronica's in the studio today. She speaks Spanish fluently. Well, she is Spanish, half Spanish. She's going to be crying into her coffee when she hears my pronunciation. In fact, it's so bad, I'm not going to try it. It's Quadriglia, Il Gatto Pardo. And after that comes a track called Caminos Cruzados. And this is by a guy called Eddie Higgins. Right, that's enough of my rubbish pronunciation. And let's get on with the music, which is going to sound an awful lot better than me. I'd say that's just the perfect music for the weather outside today, because it is absolutely stunning, and it has been for the last wee while. The last weekend being, of course, that bank holiday Monday, and that was wonderful, just an incredible weekend, and certainly enjoyed that with the children, and my wife had a fantastic time. And yes, sort of laid back summer music, and of course it's not even summer yet, which is amazing. And I was just thinking while that track was playing back to when I started doing this show back in, I think it was April, maybe, yes, I think it was April this year, but I used to run the show from 9 o'clock in the evening till 11, and it was quite dark and very, very cold, and how things have changed. We've moved to new studios. I'm in lunchtime, and it's wonderful, and I get to chat with Michael and Veronica before I do the show, and it's always lovely to go in and have a little chat with Michael and Veronica, and we have a lovely little chit chat there, and about various things. And if you're ever around, and I think I'd be I'm looking around hoping nobody's going to be wagging their finger at me, but we've got a little bit of an art thing going on in the complex now, and there's lots of lovely artwork up on the walls. And I'm sure if you're wandering around in Masterton one day, and you probably want maybe just pop in and have a little look and see what's on the walls. There's a very lovely local lady called Margaret Crawford who's got several of her paintings up, and they're absolutely delightful. You might like to come in and have a little look at them. And I do believe they're actually for sale. Yes, they're for sale. So bring your purse with you and your spare change, because who knows, you might be walking out with more than you came in with. Anyway, let's move on. I've got Close Your Eyes, David Sanchez and Rumba Jazz. Very beautiful. Close Your Eyes. David Sanchez there, and with the Rumba Jazz Band. I haven't heard an awful lot of David Sanchez in the past, but he has a great sound. Really enjoyed that. Very, very nice indeed. So anyway, let's move on. I've got quite a number of a heap of tracks still to get through, and I'm just having a little look, seeing whether I should maybe go around to somewhere else, and kind of like looking for. I think. Oh, I know. This is a nice one. I think. Yes, well, in fact, they're all nice, obviously, but some of them are actually even nicer than some. Let's carry on with the I'll carry on with the playlist. And this is a track called Enrico Pieranunzi, and this is called "Hello, My Lovely." Was Hello My Lovely with Enrico Pieranunzi and also Charlie Hayden on bass, Paul Motion on drums. Now look, I'm going to go flying without a safety net now. I'm going into another playlist. There's another playlist from this is actually for I think it will be for next week, but I just kind of like thinking that there were so many lovely tracks that I wanted to play for you that I've actually got on this playlist, and they kind of got that Latin thing going on there as well. So I thought it'd be really nice to play those instead of some of the other stuff that I got on the other tracks there, on the other playlist, I should say. And this is featuring the following music is featuring a girl. I think we call her. I guess she's a young lady now. But when I first heard her, she looked like I think she's about 12 or 13. And there's a band, kind of really to describe it basically. It's called the San Andrew Orchestra, or big band, if you will. And from that have come some of the most amazing vocalists and instrumentalists, and I think it's run by a guy called Joan Chamorro, and he's just got this incredible talent for bringing out just amazing musicians. And this is featuring Andrea Motis, who is the girl I was mentioning before. And I think, I tell you, instead of me just rabbiting on about her and how wonderful she is, if I just play some of the tracks, and then you will know just how really amazing she is. So I'm going to play. I think I'll play a couple of tracks back to back. The one is called Skylark, very famous ballad, and the other one is Triste.
Have you anything to say to me? Won't you tell me when my love can be? Is there a meadow in the mist where someone's waiting to be kissed? So skyline, have you seen the valley with springs where my heart can go a journey over the shadows in the rain to a blossom-covered plain? And in your lonely flight, how will you hear the music in the night? For me, as a wind, crazy as a love, insane as a gypsy, serenading them. So skyline, I don't know if you can find this thing, but my heart is raising on your wings. So if you see that anywhere, why'd you leave me How would you hear the music Triste é viver na solidão. É viver na solidão. Na dor cruel de uma paixão. Triste é saber que ninguém pode viver de ilusão. Que nunca vai ser, nunca vai dar. O sonhador tem que acordar. Tua beleza é um avião. Demais para um pobre coração. Demais de um pobre coração. Que para te ver passar. Só para me maltratar. Triste é viver na solidão. Triste é viver na solidão. Na dor cruel de uma paixão. Triste é saber que ninguém pode viver de ilusão. Que nunca vai ser, nunca vai dar. O sonhador tem que acordar. Tua beleza é um avião. Demais para um pobre coração. Demais de um pobre coração. E para te ver passar. Só para me maltratar. Triste é viver na solidão. Que ninguém pode viver de ilusão. Que nunca vai ser, nunca vai dar. O sonhador tem que acordar. Tua beleza é um avião. Demais para um pobre coração. Demais de um pobre coração. Que para te ver passar. Só para me maltratar. Viver na solidão. Triste é viver na solidão.
So that was Andrea Motis, M-O-T-I-S. If you put her name into YouTube, you'll come up with heaps and heaps of videos with her and all the other guys from the St Andrew big band, and some incredibly talented ladies singing with that band. And they're all so young, it's just amazing. And not only do they sing, but they also play, and they play really, really well. Saxophones, trumpet, trombone. It's just absolutely incredible. Such an absolute feast of talent and such great music to listen to. So anyway, let's move on. And coming up now, I've one of my favourite guitarists, I have to say. I love John Scofield, but one of the other guys that I really have always enjoyed listening to is a guy called Pat Metheny, or Pat Metheny. It's one of those names, you know, Metheny, who knows? I think he does, but I've never heard him say his own name, so I wouldn't know. I kind of prefer Pat Metheny. Anyway, that's what I'm saying. And this one is a track of one of his very earlier albums, and this is called It's Just Talk. It's the Pat Metheny group there with Third Wind, and that was from the album Still Life Talking, one of their very famous albums. And I've been listening to that probably. I think I first got introduced to that when I was about 23 by a former partner of mine, and she insisted that I listen to it. And I looked at the album cover and I thought, well, that's got absolutely nothing to do with jazz whatsoever. Look, there's a picture of an Inca girl on it, a black and white photograph of I'm looking at the album cover now, a picture of a sort of a montage, if you will, of a lady who is in black and white, and she appears to be mostly naked apart from a towel, and and some other sort of bizarre sort of shrubbery and bits and pieces. And I thought, oh, come on, how can that have anything? There's not a picture of a saxophone. There's no trombones or trumpets. I can't even see the word jazz on it. How can that possibly be anything to do with jazz? And of course, then she played it for me. And Rosie Walker, thank you so much for playing that for me, because it's such a great album and such great playing. And I think if you actually listen to that track from the very, very beginning to the track at the very end, it goes through so many different styles, and each one of them is just as good as the last, if not better. And Pat Metheny Group consists of some fantastic players as well, and they're still touring, still working. And one of my favourite piano players actually is part of that group, and his name is Lyle Mays, and he's an amazing player. Anyway, and I will play some of his stuff. In fact, I think I've already played some of his stuff for you in the past anyway, but I'll search out some more because he's wonderful. And anyway, let's move on. I'm going to go now to a very favourite singer of mine, an American guy. His name is Michael Franks, and this is, I'm going to put 3 tracks. I'm going to bang them all together for you, and they're all just classics, really. This first one is called Popsicle Toes.
Gave out rhythm, he sure was good to you. You can add, subtract, multiply, and divide by 2. I know today's your birthday, and I did not buy no rose, but I wrote this song instead, and I call it Popsicle Toes. Popsicle toes, popsicle toes, I always froze. Popsicle toes, you're so brave to expose all those popsicle toes. You must have been Miss Pennsylvania with all this pulchritude. How come you always lower your pentax when I'm in the nude? We ought to have a birthday party, and you can wear your birthday clothes. We can hit the floor and go explore those popsicle toes. You got the nicest North America this sailor ever saw. I like to feel your warm Brazil and touch your Panama. For your Tierra del Fuegos, I nearly always froze. We gotta seesaw till we unthaw those popsicle toes. Popsicle toes. popsicle toes I always froze. Popsicle toes, you're so brave to expose all those popsicle toes. Life's frail. Antonio prays for truth. Antonio says our friendship is 100 proof. The vulture that circles Rio hangs in this LA sky. The blankets they give the Indians only made them die. But sing the song forgotten for so long, and let the music flow like light into the rainbow. We know the dance, we still have a chance to break these chains and flow like light into the rainbow. These chains and flow like light into the rainbow. Antonio loves the desert. Antonio prays for rain. Antonio knows that pleasure is the child of pain. And lost in La Cali, when most of my hope was gone, Antonio Samba led me to the Amazon. We sing the song forgotten for so long. We let the music flow like light into the rainbow. We know the dance, we still have a chance to break these chains and flow like light into the rainbow.
That was the unmistakable sound there of David Sanborn playing that alto saxophone fade out there on Michael Frank's wonderful, wonderful track called Antonio's Song, and in brackets, The Rainbow. And before that, you heard him singing "Popsicle Toes." Some great classics there from the 40s. Good God, no, that was from that was from the 80s, and very, very kind of nostalgic music for me, part of my jazz upbringing there. And I think I must be showing my age, actually, because it's so nice to be able to hear somebody singing the lyrics to a song and I can understand every word. My daughter, she's 9 years old, she's playing a lot of stuff now, and I can't quite get my head around it. And I thought I was kind of with it, but it seems that I'm without it, unfortunately. I've tried my best. And speaking of people that they're actually with it, I saw Michael Wilson popping through back from his lunchtime constitutional down at the Ferret and Hounds, no doubt, and it's nice to see him back in the building. And I have to watch my P's and Q's, of course. And in terms of P's and Q's, I'm now going to give you some H&H, and that's Herbie Hancock, and this is a fantastic track. This is one of his earlier albums as well, I think probably from around about the 70s. This is a track called 4 a.m. There's only one bass player who ever had a sound like that, and that was Jaco Pastorius. And I don't even have the details there on the album cover, but I know, as I'm sure anybody else that's listened to bass players over the last 40 years will know, that that is undoubtedly Jaco Pastorius, an incredible bass player. And yet again, another guy who's unfortunately not around anymore. He died pretty young as well, actually. He was a pretty, I guess you could describe him as a tormented genius, which he most certainly was. And as far as I remember, I think he was found dead on a bench seat somewhere in the middle of New York, penniless, believe it or not. One of the world's most amazing, incredible bass players died penniless on a bench seat somewhere in New York. Anyway, on to more a cheerier story. And actually, I was thinking, as I mentioned rather laughingly, that Michael had come back from his lunchtime constitutional at the Ferret and Hounds. I'm sure he hasn't been anywhere near the Ferret and Hounds. I'm not even sure there's a pub in Marston called the Ferret and Hounds. And anyway, if there was, he probably wouldn't have gone in there anyway. He's probably been more likely for a run round the block with his trainers on, and probably had a cheese sandwich and a cup of coffee, no doubt, to see him through the afternoon, all the extremely hard work that he does in there in the office with Veronica. But it did remind me of the times, all the times back in the, I guess probably like the late 70s and early 80s, and I guess even through to the 90s, when I was doing a lot of gigging around in the UK, doing a lot of touring and bits and pieces, and especially actually over in Europe as well. And I was thinking about the sort of venues that I used to play in. I'm thinking, gosh, isn't it amazing that now we have virtually, I know it's not a totally smoke-free society, but we're not doing too badly. And I think if you'd have been some of the clubs with me when I was about 25, 26, I certainly remember playing a venue up in, I think it was in Glasgow, Scotland, where they've got lots of smokers up there. And boy, I think there were about 250 people in the room. I mean, I only say I think because I couldn't actually see them, because by about I was doing an Elvis Presley tribute show, and I could barely make out Elvis, who was standing about 5 feet in front of me, for the actual fug of smoke in the room. It was just incredible. There was no air conditioning, and there were, I think, every single person out of those 250 people was smoking, and it was just absolutely, my eyes were blistered and watering through the sheer volume of smoke in the room. And it's no wonder that I know Roy, you might well have heard, I'm sure, no doubt, of Roy Castle, very famous British entertainer, whose son was I wouldn't say a good friend of mine, but an acquaintance. Ben's a fabulous saxophone player back in London, with his size 14 boots that he leaves outside his flat just to frighten anybody off. He's actually only got size 10 feet, but he leaves the size 14s outside just to frighten all the the robbers out. He keeps them away in the thieves, Anyway, so Roy Castle, died of lung cancer, even though he'd actually never smoked in his life. But he put it down to all the working men clubs that he'd worked, done all these bits and pieces in over the years, and that's unfortunately what done him in, as they say, and it's a great shame. But having played in some of those clubs myself, and I know full well just how thick the smoke was, and it's a real blessed relief to know that when you go out to venues now, the only place that really people are going to be smoking is going to be possibly outside. And I know they're even looking at making a few rules and regulations around that and banning them to, I think like they do in Russia, where they stick them, if you can go and have a smoke, but it's like a little room in sort of like the underground, somewhere like that. You can't make out the people inside because it's just full of smoke. It's really a bit like that place I played in Glasgow. Absolutely incredible. Anyway, God knows what I must have smelled like when I came out of that. Disgusting. Anyway, let's move on. To all you smokers out there, you carry on. It's your choice. Well, and good on you. And I, for one, won't be imbibing in that sort of thing. Anyway, enough of the moral high ground. I shall now move on to somebody who I don't believe has ever smoked either. This is a fantastic saxophone player. I'm going to just about to say that he's not around anymore, and yet he's not around anymore. But I don't think it was through lung cancer. Anyway, this is a guy called Ronnie Laws, and this is one of his famous tracks. This is called Always There. There was the very funky, the very soulful Ronnie Laws there, brother of course, the very famous flute player called Hubert Laws, one of my very famous, one of my very favourite flute players indeed. And yeah, that's a well-known classic. I played that at a few jam sessions, that's for sure. Now look, listen, I've only got about another 5 minutes or so to go, and I thought I'd just take the opportunity to play you out with another track by that beautiful singer that I played to you before. A couple of tracks from Andrea Motis, and this is a track, and it's a well-known jazz classic. It's called Sister Sadie, and it's kind of the guy who put the whole thing together is a guy called Joan Chamorro, I beg your pardon, who is the musical genius behind the whole setup there at the St Andrew Jazz Band. And yeah, he's managed to put the most incredible a group of students together. I guess you call them students, because I mean they're all probably around about sort of somewhere between about sort of 12 and 18 or so, and every single one of them seems to be able to play the most amazing jazz, and it's just a real delight to be able to hear that. So I shall be playing you out with this. It's Sister Sadie. It's featuring Andrea Motis, and it's, again, as always, it's been a great pleasure presenting this music to you, and I do hope that you'll be able to join me again next week, Wednesday, and I promise I'll start at 12:30 and not 12:20. All right, see you then. Cheers, bye.
Sister Sadie was a mean chick, and she thought that she was real slick. Then she ran into Alfonso Brown. She never been the same until Alfonso put her down. Sister Sadie never worried, Sister Sadie never hurried. Then she ran into Alfonso Brown. She never been the same until Alfonso put her down. She just faces round the floor. She don't have any mind no more. She just found an empty space with a frown on her face. Sister Sadie was a honey, always had a lot of money. Then she ran into Alfonso Brown. She never been the same until Alfonso put her down.